So I'm just going to go through these links in order and briefly walk through what they cover. So Amazon, one of our hosting providers that's allowed. The other hosting provider is Heroku. We currently allow for Amplify to be used for your front ends. PT9 and full-time 22, I think, tried out Amplify. The back end hosting node on Amplify is not awesome. They don't have RDS hooked up to that yet, so we are pulling that and not making it available. So it will not be an acceptable host for backend node in particular. Elastic Beanstalk can be used. This is largely for data science API deployments. SageMaker also pretty common. And then you can deploy an EC2 and RDS, RDS for your database and EC2 for your server for Node. Or you can use Heroku, either one. Code quality, I've mentioned this already. We do have some standards around maintainability. This is tied into the code climate system. All repos are set up automatically by a bot that we have running in the background, just multiple times a day at random times. It checks to make sure that there is a code climate repo set up for our GitHub repos. So every repo in Lambda School Labs organization has a code climate set up. It does check for your scores and it records it over time. We don't have it automatically notifying us or anybody else just yet. Test coverage is a requirement. And we want you to shoot for, we currently have it at 40%. And so what we want for there is we want you to have a test, create one test if the tests don't already exist in your repo for build-ons, and then deploy, right? If you have to get it set up from scratch. If tests already exist, then maintain those as well as add to them, right? In order to reach 30 or 40%. Previous cohort was at 30%. And so there's going to be some increase there. Badges for 2 badges from Code Climate should be on everyone's READMEs in the next couple of weeks. Code cleanliness, we have certain standards about what you should be putting into your code. Commented out code, you're going to get your hand slapped virtually. Please do not comment out code and then commit it. We're using Git. If that code was already in Git, like there's no point in commenting it out. We still have it in Git. So if it's something you're playing with, then cut it out, right? Bring it onto your clipboard and then make a commit, and then you can add your code back in or move your code into some other file, but don't commit commented out code. It's just, it litters your code. It makes things hard to read. Somebody could be reading through your code and then they see comments and they start questioning what that's about. It's just not nice. Hard-coded data, avoid this. You might do it when you first start off on some chunk of code. Do everything you can to pull it out. If you're gonna have certain types of data in your code, then turn them into frozen constants, right? Put them somewhere in your code. You can keep a hash or an array or just turn them into a constant. So those are basic code quality. Persistence. Right now, the only data persistence that's allowed for web specifically is Postgres. That usually ties into iOS as well, where iOS needs a backend server to share data across users. And that is also Postgres. Obviously, data science, you guys have access to a few other things, but in general, MongoDB, DynamoDB, SQLite, MySQL, DB2, all the databases not listed here are not allowed. SQLite is sometimes fun to use locally, but it doesn't scale at all. So, and then if you start playing with dates, SQLite locally, if you start having lots of date functions that you're doing, you're going to have weird SQL queries where you have to write one for SQLite and one for Postgres. So just avoid it. Don't use it, even locally. Developer workflow. This one's a bigger topic. We'll actually have a separate lecture next week on this one. This graphic here. It's not really a flow chart, but it's kind of diagramming the flow from the moment you assign a Trello card to yourself. What are the steps that you could take in order to get through and complete the work, get it tested, get it reviewed, and get it out to production. And then there's a very short video walking through the Git element, the difference between Git, what you're doing in Git, and then when you're actually deploying, right? Some of the automation that we have in place will blur the lines between Git and deployment. And so this video doesn't walk through the entirety of this diagram, really just a quick example of deploying to stage from a working branch rather than from a staging branch, which is not allowed. Get only branch from master right at the top, right? Don't create some other intermediary branch like staging or develop or team or whatever you want to call it, but is long-lived. No long-lived branches. Those things are bad. They get us in trouble. So always branch from master, do a pull branch, and start doing your work on your working branch. We have some standards around the name. So feature slash is preferable to feature colon, and then whatever your name is. Oftentimes, Trello cards aren't going to be super long-winded in their title. They're a great thing to use for your branch name. So simple example, right? Change dash email. I don't think we have a specific example or standard for using dashes versus underscores. Dashes can be easier to type because you don't have to shift, right? Delete merged branches. As soon as you guys do 1 or 2 PRs after you get going, the TL should go and turn on automatic deletion of branches off on PRs. So when a PR is merged into master, GitHub will just automatically delete that branch. If there's a question as to why, the question should be, well, why do you need to even keep it? You just merge it into master. The commits are there, they're on master. You can branch off of master and make your changes directly there. Or if you need to do a hot fix, you could do it directly on master as well, but I don't recommend that. All right, GitHub. There is a bunch of stuff in GitHub, specific, more about setting up the team, setting up the repos, the SLs, guidance for the SLs, and guidance for the staff as well. So how we name our repos, the roles that people, various users have, and then we have some templates for the different types of repos. Protection set up on master. So once you get 1 or 2 pull requests finished, No one should be allowed to approve their own PR. That should be someone else. Reviews should be required. Two teammates should review and add that review, give it approval, or put some comments in asking for changes. And then local administrators are enabled. That allows staff and SLs to be able to make an approval, even if you're missing a review or something else is going on, broken build perhaps, or something like that, broken tests. Eventually, we want to get to the point where we'll add into this where your checks need to be turned on as well. So if your tests don't pass, then your PR cannot be merged. So right now, yeah, the big one is that your branch has to be up to date. And usually GitHub will present it's out of date, and it'll give you a button which will allow you to merge master into, or rebase master into your working branch. Licensing, it's MIT, so all your repos are free, that everybody in the world owns them. If you've got a copy, you own it. And then the badges that are there. We have these links, ignore those for right now. We actually have some other links that I'll go over during the product engineering. See if we can burn through this pretty quick. Approved package managers, NPM and Yarn. We do suggest and encourage the use of Yarn. And just for testing, you'll notice, well, I've got React as separate. We don't want any of the other testing frameworks to be used. We want to stick to Jest. It's pretty robust and covers pretty much all of the use cases that we're going to have. You'll notice that most of the rationale for all of this is, in this case, we actually have some very specific things. A lot of these restrictions are to enable support, right? If we allow anything and everything, with one engineering manager and 110 students, 13 teams, it'll get out of control, right? I can't know everything. Always commit your lock files. If you've ever questioned that, here's the answer. Always do it. Every time you make a change, if you do an update, try, if by accident your lock file gets changed, but you did not make any changes, don't just submit it. Like, understand why your lock file is being changed. So keep tabs on that. And if you see a lock file after you guys get going for a little bit, show up in a PR, question that. Ask the question in the PR, right? Do you know what's changed? Typically, GitHub is going to hide the contents of lock files because they're crazy long. So programming languages should probably be self-evident, but for web program, it's JavaScript only right now. I say that because I know after the CS Labs switch, that might change. For iOS, Swift is allowed, Swift 5+. The new Java program will have Java. We've got versions of what's allowed. No other language is allowed. Python for backend on DS students. Eventually, that will probably be allowed on web as well. Approved frameworks. We've got React, Create React. Next.js is barred. We know we have some build-ons that are grandfathered in or were used prior. In those cases, the teams will have the option to migrate off of Next.js. Some projects more than others we're going to encourage, or in some cases make that a requirement that your release canvas will need to identify this non-functional work that needs to happen, right? Non-user function. Angular is not allowed. Vue.js is not allowed. Obviously, both of those are big frameworks, lots of users, just like React. Um, it's down to being able to support it, right? You currently, right, we're doing the pretend thing. You're interning for Lambda Labs, and these are our standards that we have. When you go get a job for yourself or start up a business all by yourself or with a partner, you can make those choices. When you join companies, you're probably going to find, right, these kind of constraints are going to be in place. For Java, it's in there, which node, 12 plus, which expresses are allowed. And I am a little surprised we don't have the iOS in here, but we do have the Android. React Native used to be allowed. It's actually not allowed anymore. It divides your team and it becomes pretty difficult to manage. I've had multiple teams in the past use React Native, and the notion of shared code disappears after a few months. So the question about TypeScript, currently it is not allowed. What we are actually doing is we're in the process of aligning our standards with instruction, so that the experience had in labs will be based off of what you have learned during instruction. So deviating from that is not going to be allowed any further. We've allowed it in the past for good and bad. So Gatsby is different. Gatsby is not a replacement for the CRA, right? Gatsby is a library that you can add in, so libraries are allowed. Next.js is a replacement for the Create React app and has a completely different structure. But we've had teams use Gatsby and use it independent of the CRA. If they have their own CRA now, then yes, it is not allowed. State management, Redux, context API, Apollo client. There is speaking of pull requests, we do have a pull request in that will be reviewed and put in place this week. So this one is going to apply to you. It can be used. The Apollo client is usable, but only for third-party use, right? So if you're going to use GitHub API, they have a GraphQL API that's pretty decent. You can use it for that. If you have a build on that already has GraphQL, then obviously you're using the Apollo client. Remember, this isn't, Labs is not about learning new tech. It's about applying what you have learned and gaining the experience of working in teams. So these restrictions are there to help with that. Security, we have some pretty serious. We have a couple of other pages. I'll show you in Notion during the product engineering lecture. We'll talk about more about security, but be aware of what secrets you have. Make sure that your .env and .secret, or these things do not need to be committed. They shouldn't be committed. We hope, and we do get on occasion, we get notified by Amazon when Amazon tokens have been committed, because Amazon does a pretty decent job of reviewing all open source repos, and they will shut down your account, right? Put it on pause so that no services can run, no new services can be created, obviously, because if it's out there in the wild, somebody can get it. And Amazon is not the only person looking. There are lots of scripts out there that you can go find that will review Bitbucket, GitHub, all the places that repos can be stored and that are open source, and they're looking for these tokens, all the tokens, because you can spin up services, use them for spamming, use them for mining blockchain, whatever it might be. So store those things. Use .env library to keep your M files out. Make sure they're in your ignore. And oh yeah, the other thing, never store secrets. Third-party services, GitHub obviously is allowed, and we don't have any other code repos, right? GitLab is a great host. I've used it before. Used to be one of my preferences until GitHub Actions came out, and Actions is really quite nice compared to the GitLab CI. Providers, we have Amazon Web Services and Heroku that are allowed. Firebase no longer allowed. Zeit, Netlify. Again, it's about understanding all the nuance of these different providers, and you know, we've done it in the past, and we're just trying to scale that back so that it's more manageable. Identity providers, currently the only identity provider is Okta. It does not mean that you have to use it. If you feel that your app is in a good place or a good candidate for needing a identity provider, then an identity provider means that all your users are in that system. That is the source of your users. You might have data in your system for users that represents a user, but the third-party identity owns everything about their authentication. So your system would have zero capability of identifying or authenticating people. So you're adding some complexity. In the future, that's actually going to get that. It's possibly going to get removed down to nothing, where you could just build your own or use Passport.js. Passport.js is just a library, so it's totally allowed. CI/CD, you can use Heroku's, Amazon's, or the GitHub Actions. We highly encourage the use of GitHub Actions for your tests, for the code climate coverage uploader. It's just built right in. It can easily be added as a check so that your PRs can be blocked before they pass. And if they fail, they're still blocked. Domain registers. We use Namecheap, but we no longer give access to the students. All domain name requests need to go through your SL, so your TL can make those requests. DNS providers, you can use Route 53 in Amazon or Point DNS specific for Heroku. And when so most of you are on build-ons, and so a lot of this shouldn't be required. Online payment services, we do allow for Stripe. We do not have a Lambda account that is active. Again, they don't have quite the structure that's required from a security standpoint. So you guys would be spinning that up on your own. I think the farthest anyone's really gotten is just setting up a test account and getting it working in a test mode, which is quite fine. Text messaging, you can use Twilio. When you're on Amazon, there are some services that Amazon provides as well that we have allowed a few people to test out if they're hosting on Amazon. SendGrid for email, mapping, you're restricted to Google and Mapbox. Mobile app stores, the Lambda Apple App Store is currently not available for deployment. Again, it's we've had problems because students given admin access, they get admin access to everything. There is no way to structure it and really limit what's capable of being done by every user. Code quality, code climates are only source. User analytics, you got Google Analytics, Mixpanel, and Segment. Segment can actually use both of those as sources, and it does a good job of kind of blending the two. Mixpanel is good for, so let's start off. Google Analytics was originated against e-commerce. Its strength is e-commerce. It's very robust, it's very capable. You can use it in a non-e-commerce app, but it still focuses and has a tendency to lean towards the notion of an e-commerce user and whatnot. Mixpanel is a little better, a little smaller platform, very good for just about anything. Give me just a minute here. Yeah. And finally, our web API frameworks, REST. GraphQL is not allowed anymore. We are pulling that back. We have found now, after 3 cohorts of build-ons in full-time and 2 in part-time, that it is jarring, right? It's not instructed. You guys don't have any instruction against it. It's something you have to pick up. Now you might get jobs and you might have to learn that on the job and read about it, but we don't feel that that's a requirement for labs. In fact, it's probably better that we align a little better with what you've learned in core instruction. So that has been taken off of the deck there. So REST. Now, if you have a build on and it already has GraphQL, you can keep it. I would encourage working out how to migrate to REST. However, that can get complicated as well, depending on how big the API currently is. Please schedule a time with me today or tomorrow, and we can talk through that and get anything identified that needs to happen so that it reflects on your release canvas. You always want to make sure you communicate non-functional, where there's some technical change or something that needs to get done before moving forward. Otherwise, product managers, they expect what? Features, right? They want to see forward progress from a business objective standpoint. All right, that's pretty much, that is everything went through. I think I covered, I meant to skip some of that. If you want to submit a pull request and add something or change something, we do have a format that we follow. There's some description in here, and then we want to make sure that you download the markdown linter and execute it. It's just an NPM package, and that way you don't submit it and we have to respond saying, please fix your linting errors. So yeah, any questions that haven't already come up? WebGL. So WebGL is essentially just a library that you could use. So yes, you could. However, you could get yourself stuck in a rabbit hole, depending on what it is you want to do with it, right? If you're keeping it simple, or maybe some pre-made things, if you're trying to make your own charting library, that is not part of the main objective for your product vision, then I would suggest not going down that rabbit hole. I'm not familiar with 3, so I couldn't answer that directly, but it looks like it's likely just a library.
Yeah, it's a library.
So there you go. Yes, ESLint is going to be required in labs. We're working through what our initial template will be because there is a lot that you can lint in ES. So, but for you right now, it's not a requirement, so you don't have to. I would encourage every team to do it. In that case, I would, let me see, guys. We have another site, Labs Guides, that has a number of things of just setting up, either deployment, forget, walking through how to rebase a feature branch from master, what a rebasing does. But you'll notice there's an ESLint and Prettier. This was just added not that long ago. And I don't remember, oh, there we go, Jimmy. So so students have contributed to the guides. We encourage that. If you go through setting up AWS or setting something up and we don't have a guide, take the time, create a guide for it. We do have a template as well as to what's expected, the structure of the document. Once you get to your chapters, those can be named however you want. But setting up ESLint and Prettier, he walks through how to do that, both from a CLI standpoint as well as VS Code, I believe. It's pretty slick. Prettier will format your documents when you save in VS Code, so you have to be aware of that. Otherwise, things shift for you. But Prettier has exceptions as well as does a fantastic job from a formatting standpoint. Oh, did I miss something? Oh, curious about Yarn. It seems that all the TK material for newer cohorts are being refactored to use NPM. I was not aware of that. That being said, TK also has different Git information for every single cohort. I'm sorry, every program. I've looked at the Swift. I've looked at web. I've looked at the Android, as well as DS TKs and their Git stuff. The Git content is different in every one of those. So yeah, we'll have to reach out to the web program and see what's going on regarding NPM, if they're moving away from even talking about Yarn. Anyways, it's still allowed. If you don't want to use it, that's okay. You don't have to. You can use NPM. Yeah, what you're going to find in the industry is you might join a company and they use both. You might find a company that only uses NPM and companies that only use Yarn. Yarn is newer and doesn't have some of the baggage and nasties from the legacy portion of NPM, right? There have been security breaches through NPM. There have been other issues. So we'll see what happens. But right now, both are allowed. Symlinks, ingest Symlinks and dependencies from a local central store for disk space. Is PNPM okay to use? I'm not familiar with PNPM. It's not listed, so I'm going to say no. NPM, NPX obviously is also allowed. So NPM and Yarn. If that's a wrapper on NPM in some other language, then and it's just like using OMI Z shell or OMI bash, right? One of these shell wrappers for an alias for things, then that's okay. But if it's a completely different thing like Yarn is to NPM, then no, it wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, what it does is it's for people who have hard drive considerations. It basically uses NPM on the front end, and it just symlinks the file so it doesn't have to download multiple or dependencies multiple times per for different projects. It has one download, and every project that you have on your local disk uses that dependency, and it's just linked. It's linked to
it. Yeah, so long as it doesn't creep its way into the package JSON for the rest of the team. If it's something that can be used by a solo one person, then obviously that can be done. The NPM modules folder obviously can get big. You can also install all of them globally. So I'd question how valuable this is. I get that if somebody has a small disk and it doesn't, right, you've got concerns, it could help, but given that projects might use the same library but not the same version is fairly common in JavaScript. It'd be interesting to see across a large number of users how helpful that could be. But again, if it's a wrapper, then go for it. As long as it doesn't eke its way into the package JSON and other team members are required to use it. All right. Any other questions that I miss? Are those links lambdasschoollabs.com? So yes, so the link you're currently looking at is lambdaschool-labs.github. .io. And again, it's just using the GitHub. Let me pull up your, so right now the engineering standards are located, pretty much all links are going to be located inside of your student guide. I will update this and I will add the guides link as well, so that these guides are there. I'll add it here on the engineering side. Also notice we haven't updated the first sprint. So I think there's some things that we can add in here, some links and whatnot. Connects was listed in there. Connects is totally allowed. So node. Nope, it's not in node. Where would that be? That is in, nope. And really, I hate the word frameworks. I wish this was a, this said protocols, because REST and GraphQL are just protocols. Where did we have connects? I swear we had connects somewhere.
Is it not in the node section?
No, we have jest, commit. Well, maybe it got moved around, but connects is allowed.
Yeah, I did see it in there before, so I'm pretty sure it's in there.
You know, I suspect somebody moved it out.
Ah.
So connects is just a library.
Yeah.
So, right, you can use it. It's a database specific. If you want to use some other ORM, then reach out to me and we can have a meeting with the team and talk through that. But depending on its approach, connects you guys learn and instructions, so that's definitely in there. I got to write this down because I think it's been removed. Where the heck are my pens? Freaking kids. All right. Tara, what'd you ask? Use the search at the top. Oh, yeah. So if it's not showing up, this does a pretty decent job. Nothing. All right. Yeah, it's allowed. You heard it here. And I'll probably get it added this week as well. Make sure it's in there. All right, y'all. If there's no other questions, I'll let you get on with your evening. There is more to come that we'll talk about regarding engineering and some of the do's and don'ts, and looking at our tomorrow you have usability. I hate when I can't click on things. Really? Zoom is blocking me from clicking on that. Or my calendar is totally borked. Anyways, usability tomorrow night. We're going to talk about, I don't remember what that is. Trello. Oh no, I'm going to introduce what the sprint challenge is. First thing on Thursday, and then we will talk about project management later in the evening. All right. Everyone, have a good evening.